Good morning, Aqil. We're live, brother. We are live, my friend.
Good morning, brother.
Another beautiful day here in the great state of Tennessee, ain't it?
Yes. My adopted home, man. It was tough being where I was from. So had
Where are you
growing
from again?
Buffalo, New York.
And that's right.
Yep, born and raised, man. Nice place to be from and not at. Sorry.
I'm sure you don't miss those winters up there, man.
No, I don't. And it was one of those things where I went down south for something to Huntsville, Alabama, and on the way back, I had to drive, believe it or not, on the way back, as I was watching the snow just get higher and higher and higher, I started getting into a depression, and I said, "We're going home," and it makes you depressed, and it's time for a change. So.
Will Rhodes is on, so is Guile over there in the Philippines. Will is coin number 2269. Like I say every single week, man, if you want to find out if becoming a member of our coined self-preservation community, get access to the training vault, how to build gold bags, less lethal, rifle, handgun, shotgun, vehicle tactics, the whole shebang. Take a free 14-day trust drive. See if it's the right decision for you guys. If not, that's no harm, no foul, man. But I don't think it takes much looking around the news to realize we're at some weird times right now. What do you think? Am I being crazy, man? Or are we living in some weird times?
It's funny. I've been saying for the last couple months, to my alumni and stuff like, hey, got an election coming up, and I don't think it matters who wins this one. It's going to be a little interesting. 2025 is going to be interesting. So I'm thinking it's going to start in the fall. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm teaching a class when that happened with with President Trump, and the guy comes in and says, "Hey, man, of course you get the short. Hey, they shot the president." I'm like, "What?" You know what I'm saying? And then everybody, we stop everything. Everybody gets on their phones and stuff. The students and everything, and I'm like, wow, I thought we had to the fall to get started, but looks like the drama's starting early. So,
yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you more about that. But while we're waiting for folks to come on, man, I got some. Our mutual friend Taylor Wright, he had me on his podcast, and he had some. What's that?
So he's a good dude. He had me on his podcast not too long, so he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy, man.
Yeah.
But he had some like icebreaker questions, and I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. I don't know why after 10 years of doing this freaking show, I haven't kind of done that. But I like the idea because it kind of gets where your head's at and stuff like that. It's an interesting way to kind of learn a little bit more. And I know this is our second time together, but still, I think this is pretty interesting. So I'll open it up with this. What's the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
Ever about anything?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's off the top of my head. My dad gave me some. You know what? I'll tell you this because it reflects in my life. From the background I come from, talking about the stereotypes of what people are and politically, how they feel about things, where their heads are on certain things. My dad, who was a firearms instructor and an NRA instructor back in the 70s when not a whole lot of African Americans were doing it. And one time I asked him as a young guy, I said, "Hey, you going and being in these certain environments, are you, concerned about your safety at all?" And he was more or less like, "No, man, he said, that is one of the most welcoming communities that I've ever been around, and you'll see that." And as I started to do more with him as I got older, I found that to be the case. And here I am today, carrying on his legacy and sometimes being in those environments and realizing that basically, you don't, give people a chance. Don't judge them don't assume that you know people, and don't assume that they feel certain ways and think certain ways. And that is borne out in my life. And I can't thank him enough for being the kind of guy to be open-minded the way he was, and to not, be judgmental of people like that, and to give everybody a chance. So.
I love that, man. I absolutely love that. And I agree with it 100%. And I got a bit ahead of myself, my friend. Let me introduce you to the folks watching today. Those that don't know, Ak is the founder and lead instructor of Citizen Safety Academy, a firearms training company in Middle Tennessee. His background as a firearms instructor started at the age of 12, teaching youth in his father's gun club. He followed in his father's footsteps, becoming both a police officer and a firearms instructor at the age of 22. He has been training civilians for more than 30 years and training law enforcement for over 25. Ott considers himself a senior student and has many hours of training with some of the best civilian firearms trainers in the industry. He is currently a staff instructor at Rangemaster Firearms Training Services under his mentor, Tom Givens. Matter of fact, I just saw Tom at a course in Oklahoma.
Oh, you was in that SOG course. Well, you were in Simon's course. Oh, you lucky man. You lucky
man.
guy.
It was fantastic.
I heard.
Yeah, we got him coming on, and I was asking about you and Memphis and some of the other Tennessee instructors here, and of course, he just has nothing but good things to say about you guys. But are you going to see him this weekend?
Yeah, at the Professional Trainer Symposium. Yes, I'll be there. I'm staff, so I don't really have a choice. But I would be there even if I wasn't, because my mentor is a genius. So
you heard that, Tom. He's going to be there.
Yeah, the guy's the guy. He's that guy. You follow a guy around, and he still says things that you go, "Wow, that this dude that forgot more than I ever know about this stuff, man."
I've never trained with him. I think he was one of our first interviews 10 years ago, and then just seeing him on the range. Here's a guy with this, an encyclopedia of information, and could have interrupted Simon throughout and, been a guy like, well, we do it this way. Not a word. He just trained hard. He showed up, he gunned up, and he was just a student. And you would have never known he was the Tom Givens. So, that shows me what kind of man he is. You know what I mean?
And those guys are like that. It took me to be around. I'm fortunate enough to be around guys like him and Masad Ayub and John Farnham and some of the giants of what we do. And when those guys are in the class, man, they're just students. John Farnham will never interrupt you in a class, man. I'm teaching at TACCON, for example, and then John Farnham walks in the room and sits down in the front row because he's a student, and it's like, man, there's John Farnham, man. And you know what? And he's just taking in information. I've seen that back as far as going to TACCON, 15 years ago, man, down back in Rangemaster Mothership and being in a room with Claude Warner and Masad Ayub, and they're in there just taking notes and intently studying and paying attention to what the instructor is saying and not interrupting. And those are the guys, that's who I try to emulate, because if they can be like that, then who am I to, open my mouth when somebody's, delivering information, man. So
100%, because, it's like this piece of advice in isolation doesn't mean much, but when you put it in the context, it's like, okay, I agree with it. Well, you got to let this guy talk, let him explore the idea. And if you're still like, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. And then if it's something you disagree with, you can share that with them when they're off the platform on a break or something. I don't think it's maybe the right time to do it unless it's completely unsafe, that's incredibly rare. Before we go much further, my friend, let me welcome some more folks on. We got Rick Montana out there in Montana. Derek is on from North Carolina. Razmik, Mr. Gold member himself, is in the house. Tony down there in Georgia. John says, good morning from Highlands Ranch, Colorado. He's at a summit for church security. Well, Semper Fi, brother. You're doing God's work, literally. Ted is on. Gal says, that's Tagalog. I can't read that. My Tagalog isn't what it used to be. Jay Fujimoto out there in Hawaii is coin number 188. Bill Armstrong. Good morning, sir. Speaking of
yes, the man, Bill Armstrong. Yeah. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Bill. Hope you're doing well out there at your beautiful range. Razmik is on. They're speaking Tagalog again. I have no idea. But you know any Tagalog?
No.
It's a beautiful language. Yeah.
Oh, from that's not. Did you say Geechee?
No, that's in the Philippines they speak Tagalog.
Philippines, Tagalog. Okay.
Yeah.
Just something different in South Carolina. Okay.
I could say like yes, no, and let's see, like what's your name? What's your name would be Anong pangalan mo?
Oh,
so
wow.
Gal, you tell me how my pronunciation is. What books are you reading right now, Ak?
Man, let me think about it. I just read the French Anderson's forensic analysis of the 1986 FBI fight. That's what I'm reading in the industry and outside of the industry. What have I been reading? I've been rereading the Old Testament lately. So just
Oh, really?
yeah. So
Old Testament.
yeah, man. Yeah.
What are you
So,
what are you learning there? What are you seeking to learn?
after you haven't read those things for a while, it's always good to just kind of go back and just refamiliarize. So
Mm,
I with my I got a political science degree, but if I had a minor, it was in comparative religion. And
mm.
so I find that kind of thing just interesting. And in that book, seminal, whether you're Christian or not, the Christian, Muslim, or Jew, that book is part of all three. It's just seminal. So just going back, especially with all that's going on, overseas and stuff. Sometimes we're having a conversation with my friend, and he just asked me, he said, "When's the last time you looked at that again?" I said, "It's been a while. I need to look at it again." So.
That's awesome, man. I spent 6 weeks in Israel in my youth when I was a young Marine, and I really want to take my family to the Holy Land. I think as Christians, we don't seem to have a pilgrimage like a lot of religions do, and maybe that's something that we should try to rekindle because I think getting in touch with that, you realize, man, these aren't just stories. These are real places, and you can go there, and it really it'll blow your hair back. But now with the war in Gaza and the war on Hamas, it's just not a good time to take my family
No,
there.
no, 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 no.
But hopefully one day it will be.
Yes, yes, that'd be nice. Yes, I intend to making the same one. To go to Israel at some point. In fact, I had a one scheduled some years ago, and then there was a little flare up, so we had to reschedule. So I'll try again sometime. Hopefully there'll be a time in the future that we can do something.
Yeah. Bill says you owe me a call, Ak.
I do. I got to call Bill. We got to talk because I got to go out and see Bill and spend some time out there. So, yes, Bill, I'm gonna call you soon. Thanks, brother.
Rasmus says he's taking a rifle course near San Francisco. We'll be safe out there, my friend. It's a short vacation shooting rifles by the bay. Man, I love the sound of that.
Nice. Yes.
So what are you learning as far as you said you were also within the industry? You're reading about the 1986 FBI shootout. I had the pleasure of interviewing Ed Morales.
Yes.
I think 3 times, man.
Nice.
Just a phenomenal man. And
yes.
if you're listening to this, if you haven't heard those interviews I did with him, I encourage you to go listen because I had written articles about this. My grandparents, oddly enough, were produce purveyors, and they were on the Miami produce market and were at the gas station and heard the shots.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, that's an intimate little thing. Yeah. I remember them calling like, "Hey, there's a gunfight up here and some FBI agents are killed." And
crazy.
So what are you learning about that you kind of didn't already know?
Well, Rangemaster staff, and Tom was nice enough to allow me to teach the Rangemaster combative pistol class since he's been focusing on the instructor development class. And I'm happy for it because I'm a big fan of that class and studied that class. I've been studying Tom, not just the way he does things, but even going back and looking back to the mothership documents and seeing how that course kind of materialized and how it grew and changed and into what it's become. And so when he, was nice enough to let me teach it, I started doing a deep dive so I could, understand the parts of that class a little better. And so I was in high school when the 86 FBI, but because my dad was a firearms instructor, I was kind of in tune with that kind of stuff and all the changes that came as a result. I'm fortunate to be old enough to have seen that happen. Mm-hmm. And as a part of the combative pistol class, we discussed that and the lessons that are learned from that seminal event. And so, I've gotten some information here and there. I've watched as many videos as I can. And after doing some research, I realized that there was this book, 130-page book on just, the fight itself and where the bullets went, who shot what, how this happened, how that happened. So I could do a deep dive into it and understand and be able to explain it and discuss it. I believe that you can, you should understand something deeply enough that you can explain it simply. And so that's what I was trying to do.
There's so many amazing lessons on there. One of the ones for concealed carriers is, some of the agents, they knew they were going to get in a gunfight, or it certainly looked like they were, and they took their firearms out of their holsters and pinned them underneath their legs and stuff like this. And one agent lost his holster and was gun in the crash and was completely out of the fight. So Caliber selection, firearm selections, body armor. There's a lesson there for everyone. Highly encourage you to do what Ak is doing. And whether you're a firearms trainer or you're just a student in the industry, or we should all be students, by the way, you need to read that. Doug is on, says, hey, Ak, Doug Gregg here. Met you through Rangemaster.
I remember Doug. How's it going, Doug?
If you had to teach a class on one thing, Ak, what would you teach?
The most important stuff is personal safety in the context of American culture. That's what I'm about. That's my how should I say it? My mission, my thing that I'm most into is just people being safe. And like you, being a police officer, drove that home. I grew up in a pretty rough area, but then becoming a police officer, I saw even more that made me go, wow. People's personal safety and security is really their responsibility. So let me go ahead and do what I can, to help them in that regard.
Without putting you too much on the spot, Ak, when you think about the course outline, because I like how you said, not just personal safety, but in the context of the United States, what is some of the things that are going to be on that class?
Well, first, kind of like Clint Smith, first we teach you how to avoid it, because that's always the best option. How to, I believe that, certain aspects of American culture lull people to a certain false sense of security. And so how to break out of that, because everything begins with the mindset, which is why I'm such a big fan of Tom's classes, that, he teaches mindset first, because without the mindset, nothing else flows right. So proper mindset, I know we say situational awareness, but all that goes into it. So how do you do that? Because it's not always obvious. That safety is something that you do. It's not a place, or a state. It's an active way of life, basically. And so, and then, taking people to, after we show you how not to get into it, that if you can't avoid it, keeping in mind, statutes, state statutes, city ordinances, Constitution of the United States of America, how to do it in a way that's ethical, legal, and moral, and then get them on the path to maintaining that, and finding out what it is that they actually need to do, because everybody's not going to be into this stuff like we are, so how do we make it practical for people? So that's what I would like to do.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like the point about maintaining, because a friend of mine that I do the Monday show with, Will Wood, he recently said something. He may have been quoting somebody, I don't know, but he said something like, tradition is there for the things we've forgotten, or something like that. And I'm like, huh. And that's true, because
Yes.
it's like these things that why do we even do this anymore?
Right.
It was something that solved a problem,
right,
that now we've kind of forgotten about.
Yes.
And I think that speaks to what you were saying about, this is not an act or a one-time thing or a place you go. This is lots of little steps you do every single day.
Yes. Yes.
And every time I come in the house, I take my gun off, put it in the safe. And that's another day I didn't, to quote, was an Ice Cube, I didn't have to use my AK. So
right.
But I mean,
yes.
it's like I'm being funny, but at the same time, it's like, I didn't have to do that today. That's fantastic. I must have done a lot of things right, or got lucky, or both.
Yes. Yes. It's little things. Like the other day, I noticed that if I got my head stuck in the vehicle getting stuff out of it for too long, I pull my head out, just look around. You know what I'm saying? And it takes a split second, and it's not paranoid. It's just prepared. I just take a glance around. Everything is good. Then I go back to what I'm doing. And it's little things like that, that you inculcate into your daily, movements that, and that become a part of, the safe lifestyle, and but again, it takes some thought. It takes some maintenance. It takes some application. You have to learn how to do it, because it's not intuitive. It's not as intuitive. Maybe we're born with it, but then we get socialized out of it, because I think that a lot of people don't realize just how much television, movies, and video games train you.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
For example, my brother John Hearn from Rangemaster, he'll tell you something. He'll ask a question in class like, "Who here has been in a shooting? Who here has shot somebody? Who here has been shot?" And and unless you've done a law enforcement thing or military thing. So you got a few people who may have experienced that in real life, but most everybody else, their hands stay down. And then he'll say, yeah, you did. You got it from television. You know what I'm saying? You've seen, we will draw, our experiences often from what we see on that thing. What do I mean? I've never been to France, but I have an idea what the Eiffel Tower looks like from seeing it on television and in media and stuff like that. And that will form, my opinion on things. And so I remember I actually, survived the gunfight or two as a cop. And I say survived only because the only reason why I worked out was the person was worse than I was. And that's why I decided to go get trained. But I remember the part that made me really think that I had to go get trained was I didn't see blood packs explode. And so one of the things you have to teach people in what we do is if you're looking to see your bullet impacts, you won't. You may see changes in their behavior, you know what I'm saying? But unless it's a, shot to the forehead or something like that, you won't see it. You know what I'm saying? You won't see it. And the person wasn't changing their behavior at the time immediately. And so, I remember having to reflect on that deeply. And that was one of the things that made me decide to go, and go off the Tactical Defense Institute way back in 1998 to start getting trained, was because I said, hey, this is. And so where did I get that idea from? For example, you've trained people, Rich, and a lot of people first thing they pick a gun up, they drop the left elbow down if they're right-handed, right? And they get into a stance, you know what I'm saying? And I go, if you weren't taught that stance, now me and you were old enough that we were taught that stance, when we joined the force. But if you weren't taught that stance, where did it come from? And I think about it, I go, yeah, video, movies, TV, you know what I'm saying? That's what people mimic. Human beings we mimic things, and that's what they're doing.
That's a great point. I never really thought of it that way, but I like it. Never been to France, but I've seen the Eiffel Tower, and I got an idea what Parisian culture is like.
Right. You know what I'm saying? I have an idea what France is like based on. So one of the reasons why we travel, so you can go, oh, this is what it's really like. You know what I'm saying? Or sometimes you go see something, and I remember the first time I actually saw the Statue of Liberty. You know what I'm saying? I was like, wow, the thing's huge. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I knew what it looked like from, but I actually went to New York with like a field trip with, when I was young and a kid. And sure enough, there it is. And I'm like, wow, you know what I'm saying? And so the scale, sometimes you don't get the scale. Sometimes you don't get smells, things like that. We're talking, I'm sitting there watching TV with the wife, and I'll go, I wonder what it smells like there. You know what I'm saying? And, but we draw a lot of what we get from media, social media, TV, movies, video games, things like that. And it really colors our perceptions of things. And so sometimes we have to find a way around that.
No, I love it. I 100% agree with you. When I was writing my book, my memoir that came out last year, I was talking about being in combat for the first time and the things that nobody ever taught me, as far as what to experience. Like I never knew that Warsaw Pact countries, the Soviet bloc countries, use green tracers. I knew we use red.
Right.
So when I saw green tracers for the first time, I'm like, what is this? I mean, literally like, what the hell is this? Or what, they shot a frog missile at us, and I didn't even know they had frog missiles, let alone what one looked like when it coming at it. Just looked like a Saturn V rocket taking off.
Right.
So I mean, until you've been in those situations, it's hard to know. Like, going back to your analogy, about movies, and no movie I'd ever seen with their green tracers, right?
No.
So, I mean, as much as we can, but I love that your point about smell too, because a good writer, as he's writing, will write those in there. It smelled like cordite, or it smelled like whatever, to put you in that scene. So I think that also makes a great instructor, right? When we create those environments.
Right.
Where the student really gets experiential learning. They get to learn and experience all the stuff that's going on. And that kind of leads me to my next question. And that is like, what do you want to be remembered for, Aq? When it's all said and done, man, and you breathe your last breath and people are talking about what a great guy you were, what do you want to be remembered for?
I like to be remembered as a guy who helped the people around him be a little safer. And I try to stress this with instructors. Me and Tiff, we do a lot of instructor development. And
I need to get her on the show, by the way, man. You got to
please do. She's a phenomenal lady, and a lot more articulate than I am. I'm a product of the Buffalo public school system, but one of the things that we try to drive home to guys is what we are doing is way too important. The stakes are too high. And so, we make you've heard it. If I'm a bad golf coach, you just suck at golf, but
Right.
if I'm a bad personal defense instructor, say it can cost you your life, all that you've worked for, your home, your family. And if when I'm laying there, if people say, hey, that guy really tried to make people's lives better in that regard, then I'll consider it, a success. And I don't really have a choice in that. I tell people it's because I had parents who were community organizers to some extent and ran youth programs. One of the things my dad did, he would take inner city youth out into the rural areas to learn how to hunt and fish and just see something else other than the inner city streets. And I'm glad he did, because that's why it was easy for me to move to a place like Tennessee. Where other people were like, hey, Michael, when'd you move there? And I'm like, my summers were my winters were Run DMC and my summers were Oak Ridge boys growing up. And I'm glad for that. He didn't keep us pigeon-toed, and that I believe that's led to me to be able to do what I'm able to do today. So if people say, he tried to make the world a little better and keep people a little safer, and avoid what my father would call the tyranny of the criminal element, then I feel like that life that I did my part.
Man, you sound like you had a good dad, my friend.
Oh, he was a phenomenal guy. Phenomenal.
Is he still with us?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had to finally put him into a assisted living place, and he's in there. He used to tell me he's in there running the community organizing in there. So he's on tenant council meetings, and that's just his thing. So it's cool. He's happy. So
that's what we need more of in America. People that are engaged and involved.
Yes.
Trying to make the world a better place. And we're talking about this because we moved from rural East Tennessee to inner city Memphis when I was a kid.
Woo!
Yeah, right.
God bless you, brother.
Oh yeah. So Tom and I were talking about some of the places that we lived down there. And my dad said, I know it was hard on you, but it probably was good for you at the same time. And it is, it is.
Yes.
You got to grow where you're planted, man.
Yes.
I mean,
it was
imagine.
A point where I'm sorry, finish, please.
No, I'll go ahead, Prince.
I was saying, there was a point where my dad, we grew up in a rough neighborhood, and we owned the house, but the neighborhood changed. It got really bad. And I was one of the few kids that had two parents. And which is why, I found out later that some of the kids that I grew up with acted like my dad was their dad because they didn't have one. Yeah. But there was a point where I said, man, why didn't you get us out of there? And he was like, because I knew that it would give you a little bit of grit. You know what I'm saying? And he was right, so later on, there's so many lessons that I learned in that environment that, that I had he took me out to a cul-de-sac somewhere, maybe that we may not have been, what we ended up being, which was guys who had some resiliency. So kudos to your parents for throwing you a little deep here, man, so you can, develop some grit, man,
No doubt. And that's, man, so many different places I could go with that. It is good. And I was telling my wife yesterday about this concept of anti-fragility.
Yes.
And I was like, for those that aren't familiar with it, the way I understand it, like if I was to drop this little glass vial, boom, it hits the ground, it's going to shatter. Or let's say it doesn't shatter. Let's say they're just micro fractures that I can't see, so that the next time it's bumped, it breaks.
Right.
Whereas with human beings, man, we have the ability to be anti-fragile, meaning the more we're stressed and the more, like, think about the way you build your muscles. You build it by tearing those muscle fibers up and then letting them regrow. And of course, Dr. Gordon Botson is on. So Dr. Botson, if I'm misquoting what muscle fibers do, forgive me, sir. But no, that is so true. And I think today as parents, and I'll use myself example, I got 4 kids. We tend to want to shelter them more because I know it's hard on me. And I'm like, I have the means and ability to get my kids in the safest schools, private schools. I have the ability to put them in a great neighborhood where maybe me and my brother and sister didn't have that. And I did. And I look back now and go, was that the right decision?
Well, you got to weigh it, because I had to just do the same thing. I want my kids to be safe, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, so what I did was I took my boys and I put them in boxing. You know what I'm saying? So they could know what it was like to be punched in the face and not, fall to pieces, So he said pre-stressing things, you know what I'm saying, so that they build some resilience, So you did the right thing. We gotta. Sometimes we have to. My friend Ryan McCann says his mom made beautiful, small little woman who's raised these monster boys, and I was like, when I met her, couldn't believe it. And he said she always made us do contact sports because she wanted us to be able to do what, to be able to resist. She said that I guess she had a bad experience with domestic violence, and she said stuff that we teach. She said it shocked her the first time he hit her because she was like, she had no parking space for that violence, and so she put her boys in contact sports so that they would always be resilient in that way. And although Ryan's, I don't know, 5'4", he's one of the toughest little guys in the world because he came through that, and kudos to her for doing that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that idea of, and I think like when you, especially dealing with criminals, man, that's why I say to be law enforcement, you probably should have worked in corrections first. You get to spend time behind bars with these people like, oh, he thinks different. Wow,
yes.
Look at that.
Yes.
This ain't the first time this cat's been punched in the face. Okay.
Right.
And he's not going to behave like, your average cul-de-sac kid is going to act when they get smacked in the mouth. So the more we can teach our kids that in a safe environment, the right way, the better.
Right.
Let's see who we got on here. Howie is on. Says, good morning, gentlemen. Gordon Botson says Keith Richards and Mick Jagger are both 80 and still rocking. And he's responding to Tony's comment that Richard Simmons is dead and Steve Tyler is still crushing it. He's rethinking whole longevity. Nova is on. He says at the doctor's office. Can't wait to re-listen to everything. Jim says you're making some great points, and yes, you are.
Good day, Jim. Good to see you.
Hey, let's talk about, you mentioned when we were talking about the things that you want to be remembered for and the class that you would want to teach if it was the only thing you could teach. And you mentioned situational awareness and avoidance being the number one thing. And I think you alluded to, Ak, that it's can be misunderstood, or how do you create it? We talked a little bit about resilience, and I think that's part of it, right?
Yes.
But unpack a little bit more as far as situational awareness and avoidance.
Well, we get distracted and we're looking at screens all the time. And first we have to, I think part of teaching people situational awareness and avoidance is, first of all, giving them the lay of the land so that they understand what they're actually dealing with, because a lot of them don't know. So first, giving them the nature of what they should be looking for and what they should be paying attention to. And the cool thing is we got something now that we didn't have back in the day when we started teaching this kind of stuff. We got surveillance video.
Yes.
So all types of situations. So pretty much any type of way you can be robbed, accosted, jumped on, beaten, stabbed, whatever, it's out there on video somewhere. And which, talking about the pre-stressing, that violence inoculation thing where, get your head around that kind of stuff, see what's possible. And then a lot of times, once you can kind of see what's possible and what's going on around you, then you can start, thinking and processing how you can possibly in your own way and in your own life start making better decisions, because it all comes down to decisions. Okay. Mm-hmm. How much gas do I keep in the car so that I don't have to end up pulling over into a sketchy part of town to gas up or go to an ATM during the night, planning your day out, that type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Of course, Tom is part of Tom's genius is giving you pithy statements that just encapsulate everything and basically know who's around you and what they're doing all the time. But especially in transitional spaces or any space that you don't control who comes and who leaves. And that's all, you know what I'm saying? And, also the flip side of it that I've been reading and watching some Colonel Cooper videos lately. And I've realized some of the brilliance of his color codes is that not only is it about situational awareness, but that white, yellow, orange, and red are about also lowering your inhibitions to do the kind of violence or that you may have to do to another person to survive. Because good people, should have mental and emotional barriers to doing great violence. That's what makes you good people. That's the disadvantage.
So, what do you think about, on that note, man, I don't mean to interrupt, but what do you think about, like Dr. Jordan Peterson saying that, a good man needs to have the capacity for violence, but have it under control. And I'm paraphrasing. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. That goes back to that. I thought about that when you said, the cool thing about working for Buffalo Police Department is before you can go out on the street, you had to work cell block. And right after they were put in, before they went to arraignment, that was cell block in Buffalo, before they were sent over to the county. And man, did we fight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Oh, and so like you said, it did what? It inoculated us against who I was going to be dealing with when I got out on the street, you know. And so I think that also goes back to what we were saying about, you know, growing up in Memphis or putting my kids in boxing. I didn't want them to be incapable of doing it. I wanted them to have the capability of doing it, but also know when and the way and how it was legal, moral, and ethical to do it. If we are people who believe that violence is just a tool, which is one of the reasons. Guy wrote that essay years ago. I passed it out, called "Violence is Golden."
I don't know that I read that.
Oh, you got to go read that thing.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. I'm gonna write that down right now.
Yeah, man, you got to read that thing. Violence is golden.
Do you remember the author, Ak? If not, that's okay. And a matter of fact, if you can send me a link, I'll put it in today's show notes so that people can read that.
Will do. And there was a time when those essays were out. You know, what was the Violence is Golden? The Gun is Civilization. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, those by Marco Cluse. It was a guy Michael Cluse did. I think it was his essay, The Gun is Civilization. There's a few of them like that. I'll send you a couple links, man. You got to read those things because they help redefine how we look at violence, which is why, you know, my fighting pistol class is called pro-social violence, which is a term that I stole from my brother John Hearn, who understand that just like there's anti-social uses of violence, there's also pro-social uses of violence, you know, and that violence again is just a tool. When we call police officers, we want them to show up with what? With the ability to do violence on our behalf if necessary. Because when you need violence, you need violence.
Man, I hope everybody heard that, because I say that all the time when people like anti-gun, anti-gun, anti-gun. I'm like, it's a simple argument. You just say, okay, I understand that. So there's no place in which you'd feel comfortable using violence, right? Yeah. Well, so in that regard, somebody's kicking the door, I would call the police. Fantastic. Call the police. That's fine. When that responding officer shows up, would you rather them have a bouquet of flowers or a firearm? Oh, well, okay. Well, yeah, a firearm. Yeah. I'm like, exactly. So the problem isn't the gun. It's the moral and ethical, appropriate, judicious use of lawful of the gun. You know, it's like
they're okay paying somebody else to come do violence on their behalf.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And that's what it comes down to. And so, yeah, we have to, you know, but again, when we bringing this full circle that we were talking about, as far as how society can condition you and culture you out of certain. That's where we are now. And I think a lot of it has to do with that we're living in one of the safer societies, even though it's not quite as safe as we think it is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I live in the neighborhood where women can still run down the street right now, you know what I'm saying, you know, in practically a bikini and in the morning, and God bless her, she should be able to do that. Yeah. You know, but the problem is, you and I know this is one of the few places in the world you can do that. You know, in fact, where I live, it has a low crime rate that this is one of the few places in the country you can do that. You know what I'm saying? But and I think it's
Are you in Rutherford County, Ak, or where do you live at?
I am Murfreesboro.
Okay.
You know, so but even here, that, you know, there are still places that and even with that, there's still women who do that every year who get victimized, unfortunately. You know, so
yeah, one of my very best friends is a vice sergeant in Murfreesboro PD. I've had him on here a couple times, and there's human trafficking in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is just you know, unbelievable. Right.
So right here on the 24.
Yeah, so if Murfreesboro, exactly right. If Murfreesboro is like that, then guess what? Wherever you live in America has its problems, which is why awareness and avoidance is so important. Right. Steve says, my brothers taught me how to handle getting beat. Mom just made sure we didn't damage the house. She made us fight out in the yard.
See, that's the cool thing about being a younger brother. See, I was an older brother. My younger brother is far tougher than I am because we beat him. You know what I'm saying? So by the time he got out, he was used to, you know, fighting people larger than him was nothing.
Exactly. He ain't afraid of nothing. My brothers were the same way. My younger brother. Jim says, I think it's so important to help folks understand how to be aware amid all the distractions we face. Man, he is absolutely right. We have more distractions now than we certainly did when you and I were kids.
Yes, sir. Yes, the world's gotten a lot smaller. You know, there was a time when, you know, if you married a girl, she would be within a 3-mile radius, man. Now, you know, I mean, we got so much going on, so much media, so much, you know, screens, you know, I mean, I remember talking to a guy from Sprint years ago who was telling me, you got 3 screens in your life, and we're trying to merge them together into this. And I remember thinking, wow, that's utopian. But you know what I'm saying? But that's what we do. I mean, we're on a screen now. I've got a television screen in the house. I've got my phone, and something's always trying to get our attention for nothing else, marketing and money. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yes, they pay for our attention. So.
It's funny. I asked you about awareness and avoidance, and somehow we got off on teaching your students the ability to use controlled violence. And I love that
It's
because
funny how they're connected.
well, it is, and it's one thing to say, well, I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to avoid it. Okay. Well, that works until it don't. And when it don't, now it's the time to have a ruthless, judicious use of violence. And I say that because every time I hear our politicians, and recently with the assassination attempt on Trump, we heard Biden and Kamala and some of the other folks come out and say, it's never right to use violence. It's never, ever right to use violence. So what are you talking about?
Right.
Of course, sometimes it's right to use violence.
Right.
It's the only thing that evil understands, for lack of a better word. Let's call it evil. And if you're afraid to use violence, then you're going to hide behind somebody that isn't afraid to use violence.
Right. And a lot of times I find those people, it's their understanding of, first of all, is there any evil? And if we can just get rid of them all. I actually was at a podcast yesterday with some people who aren't necessarily gun people. And I believe are pretty much gun control advocates. And one of the questions the girl asked me was, being that you grew up in a rough neighborhood, and I've had plenty of people that I know, including friends and family of mine, not only shot to death, but stabbed to death. And she said, how do you approach it? I said, well, growing up, we were good kids. And so before I could even get a gun legal in New York, I got a gun off the street. My dad didn't know about it, because he wouldn't have been okay with that. He would have understood, but he would have been okay with it, because what he did. So I kept him away from that. But I went out and bought him. It was a Brico 22. And I carried that thing around with me because the bad guys in my neighborhood had them. And what kept them away from me was the fact that they knew that I had a gun. And so I told her, I said, guns have always been a security blanket for me, going back to my teen years, because I realized that bad guys knew that once I had a force multiplier, once that we were on the same level, that they could get hurt by me as easy as they could hurt me, that they stayed away. What I'm saying? And I said that has ramifications, not only in personal violence, but dealing with tyranny of governments even, what I'm saying? As far as, how you can either compel people to do things. And this is where I think that guy, Marco Clue, says the gun is civilization. There's 2 ways to do it. You can either compel people or you can Or you can have to negotiate with them. You know what I'm saying? And I want people to always have to negotiate with me. You know what I'm saying? And the way they're able to do that is I'm able to defend myself. So
I love it. Absolutely. The Second Amendment is without question, I don't know, man, maybe the greatest thing we have.
Yes,
and
it really is.
And I'm telling you, that's when I travel, I constantly hear that, like, don't give it up. We don't have it here. And, we're just subjects. They can do whatever they want. We're not citizens. They don't look at us as we have any power whatsoever. It's like they can run over us. Yes. Don't give up your Second Amendment. And I'm like, well, we kind of live in a bubble where we almost take it for granted. And every now and then you got to think about what an amazing document our founding fathers have left us.
If you really think about it, it's this experiment. I'm scared because I don't even know how much longer. I hope this thing can last forever. But you and I know that the forces, to buck against it are hard. But if you really think about what we have going on here, in light of feudal countries that are organized feudally, or with kingships, or or dictators, and what we have here, man, is I believe is at this scale is probably one of the. It's amazing that it's even running like this. You know what I'm saying? That it not being a monolith, that there are 50 states that each. I mean, I'm so happy that Tennessee is different than New York. You know what I'm saying? That I could not be there. I could live and move someplace else and be around people who think closer the way I do. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that it's running like this is really kind of defying history in a way. This is amazing. We live in at an amazing time, and where it's we're prosperous for the most part. We're primarily mostly safe, and though people are trying to change that, I feel we get along, and there's a level of peace here that I think comes because it's so decentralized in a way. You know what I'm saying? And it's freaking awesome, man. I was just reflecting on this the other day as I was thinking about talking to friends of mine from countries who, well, it's dangerous there, and I go, yeah, but you know, with freedom there comes some danger. You know, because the same people who can make you safe can also do what? Oppress you.
Amen.
You know, and so, you know, I don't think people reflect on that a lot, and I do, and I'm happy to be born, especially me. I mean, you know, I'm at a time I'm doing something that my ancestors wouldn't even imagine being able to do here in America, even. So
yes.
I'm at a great time in this country, and I think this is awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, man. Everything you said is just beautiful and so true. Like, because it's easy to watch the violence that we have here in America, and I understand how when people come here they're scared. And one of the things I see all the time is because we travel to Scotland and Ireland a lot, where our ancestors came from, and I talk to these people and like, oh, they love country music. So they fly into Nashville. They want to go see Graceland, you know, and stuff
That's
like
awesome.
that. But they're also kind of scared. Like, okay, well, they do their homework. They know what they're getting into with Memphis, but they still go and they have a great time. They go to Beale Street and they eat some good food down there and appreciate the Mississippi in the Delta community.
Yes.
But you know, they say the same things. Like, what's it like living there? Like, it's my home, you know. And being free is messy, but
yes.
I carry I carry the tools, and I have something between my ears to keep me and my family safe. And yeah, I love it.
And if generally if you keep your risk profile low, you know what I'm saying, then you know, now we always prepare for that time when, you know, circumstances are out of our control and things happen. But you know, if you keep your risk profile low, you know, it's pretty, you know, beautiful place to be, you know what I'm saying? But the cool thing is that we have these hedges against things changing dramatically that they don't in places like that. You know what I'm saying? You know, whereas here, you know, if you know, I remember people saying here in Tennessee, there's no state income tax. And they said that there was a time when people were, you know, the governor was talking about bringing a state income tax, and the people were like, no. You know what I'm saying? And I love that, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, there's so many places where that doesn't happen, you know, so.
Where I had a guy come in the other day, and he says, because I'm thinking about putting in a whole house generator, right? Because I think
you should.
Exactly right. I mean, I have 3 generators, and I've got it all backfed into the house, so I have the ability. But just to have it sitting there with a 1,000-gallon propane tank.
There you go. Yeah, right.
But I noticed he didn't have a Tennessee accent, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm a California transplant." I'm like, "Oh, what brings you here?" And he said one word, Newsom. Wow. I'm like, really? Yeah. He said, "Yeah, I was born and raised in California, man, but that guy destroyed the state, and he doesn't know my politics." So he immediately goes into it, and I'm just like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, welcome to Tennessee, man. Don't F it up, you know."
Yep, don't change it to California, please. Yeah, so we getting invited. I mean, literally, I'm at I do work at a firearm pharmacy in Lebanon here. That's where I do a lot of my training. Now we got an agreement, and I swear every day somebody comes in there from California, man, looking to buy a gun and stuff. And you know, and my whole thing is welcome, you know, even though Tennessee is getting full, but welcome, but just don't try to change this thing to California, please, you know.
Maybe I've been thinking about this because I got a lot of friends in Montana, and matter of fact, going up to Montana in a week and a half or a week, and they're like, Montana's full. We can't take anybody else. You know, I think me and you might have to start a campaign. Tennessee's full.
Tennessee's full. Go to Montana. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, wow, yeah. If Montana's full, and I get it. Yeah. I mean, because it's so. I got here in 2007. And I loved it, and I was in Murfreesboro, and Murfreesboro's completely exploded since then. So, but it's funny. I'm ready to move, you know, more onto the rural areas now. But I was so happy that it was vastly different than where I'm from, and I try not to feel that way, like, you know, because I'm a transplant, so I'm trying not to look at other transplants like, oh, that's enough, you know what I'm saying, you know. But at the same time, I get it. My whole thing is just, you know, I'm a Tennessean. You know, I didn't come here to become a New Yorker and change this place into where I'm from. You know, if you like where you're from, then go back to where you're from. You know, but I'm trying not to be funny, but I feel like you like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah. And I'm in a very unique spot because I'm a seventh generation Tennessean. My kids are
Wow.
eighth generation, and I mean the first settlers into what is now Tennessee, when it was just part of something called the Western Territory, was
Right.
one of my great grandfathers, Captain
Wow.
William Bean.
Very cool.
So I don't know anything except for now. Don't get me wrong, I've moved around, but you know, Tennessee is certainly home.
Yes.
And I want to keep it that way. And I agree with you, Ak. I think one of the great strengths of America is the decentralized nature of you got. I think we have like 3,600 counties in the United States. Every county has its own kind of flavor, its own sheriff, its own government.
Yes.
And that makes us strong, and we can never lose that.
Yes.
Dr. Gordon Botson says, we used to say, don't California my Arizona when I lived in Arizona. Steve has an interesting point. I want to get your thoughts on it. He says, I think most people with no fighting experience hesitate to react until they lose any advantage. What do you think?
I think he's exactly right. And that's what one of the things our job is. And that's what Cooper was trying to do with the color codes, was prepare people to be able to use that, what do you call that, you know, immediate, ruthless violence, you know, counter attack, you know, attacking your attacker. You know, you can, if you stay on defense too long, you lose. Right. You know what I'm saying? Defense only prolongs the loss. What you do is at some point you have to go on offense. But I agree with you. Good people don't have that. And we're not socialized for that. There was a time, maybe, you know, when America was, you know, we were all raised to be warriors and that type of thing. And you have cultures that are like that, but we don't have that anymore. And you got people who would much rather not deal with any of that at all. And you know, the problem is that when violence visits you, what do you do? But I agree with you. That's one of the that's the dithering that, you know, that John Farnham talks about, or the fiddle fucking that I'm sorry, I don't know if I can use that term.
No, you're okay. You're right.
That Tom talks about, and that is one of the biggest things that you have to train through is that reaction. And so I hope that violence inoculation, you know, inoculation meaning taking a weakened version of it, putting it into your body so that you develop, you know, a defense against it by watching, you know, surveillance video and things like that will help you to counteract faster, because the longer that it takes you to do that, your chance of being hurt go up exponentially with each moment, each passing moment.
No, 100%. And I definitely learned this. I think it was like a video circulating back in the day. And it was discussing like, when can a sentry use deadly force in protecting his post, whatever. And the video was talking about, basically it was saying the AOJ triad, you know, you got ability, opportunity, jeopardy. And each one is a point of the triangle. And this, they were interviewing sentries who had used deadly force in protecting their post. And you'd hear the guard saying, as he's scaling the fence with a rifle, I saw my triangle coming together. And that was, I'm justified to use lethal force here. So I say that because it's not a bad mental thing to use. Now, obviously there's 5 elements of the law of self-defense. I'm not going to go into them right now, but just thinking about, does this person have the ability to harm me? Is this person and is the opportunity there? Am I in jeopardy? Have they said, I'm going to effing kill you in concert with the other things? And if so, I don't need to wait for them to start shooting at me. I'm cleared hot legally to start dispensing, you know, proportional force. And if that up to and including deadly force. But I think Steve has a point. A lot of good guys, they go too early or they wait too late, and they get themselves not only in tactical problems that they can't get out of, but they get themselves in legal problems as well. What do you think?
Most definitely. And honestly, sometimes, and Chuck Hacker says a lot, they don't use enough force early enough, unfortunately. Meaning not only using it at the timing, but using enough of it. You know, I watch police activity on YouTube, and I watch a lot of police you know, shootings and use of force things. And I wonder, like, a lot of times why why people didn't go to pepper spray, or things like that early enough, fast enough. They waited till the guy struck first and things like that. And so what I think people have to do is, again, train themselves to see those things. And when they do, really, if you use enough force early enough, it's actually what Chuck Hagerty said, de-escalation.
100%.
Yes, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because if you can do that early enough, fast enough, and hard enough, you can actually prevent. You may even prevent yourself from having to use it. You know what I'm saying? Or as much, or we don't want people to survive those situations. We want them to dominate them, because the longer those situations go on, again, your chances of being hurt or losing go up exponentially.
Yes. No, I 100% agree with you. And matter of fact, that's part of the American warfighting doctrine, is escalation dominance. I will escalate this to a place you're uncomfortable. You can use a metaphor like, I'm going to take you to the deep water, brother. I hope you're ready. You may not be able to swim out there, but I'm going to swim like a fish in that damn deep water, which is why we got to train on the mat. We got to train on the square range. We got to train with our mouth and our brain. And that's another thing, the judicious use of force was really what I'm shocked at what I saw. Have you seen the shooting of, I think the police officer's name is Sean Grayson? He killed Miss Massey. My God, man. You're talking about something that just shocks the consciousness of, here's a woman, maybe she's mentally compromised. I don't know what's going on. But just the way that that officer was talking to her before he shot her in the head, for God's sake, that guy's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And from what I can tell, he deserves to be there. Have you acquired any thoughts from watching that?
Yeah, I saw it. You could kind of see it coming, because of his approach. A lot of times,
can you explain to people that haven't seen that? Can you catch them up on what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about?
The lady was, I believe, the woman called, and it was clear from, if you listen to the video I saw, had her when 9/11 called, and you could tell that she was a little loopy. And so he gets there, and she explains that she's scared and all this type of stuff, and so everything's going okay, but he has some. And so he talks to her, and he finds out there's nothing really going on, and really he should have left at that point. But he's got some paper. He's got some paperwork to do. There's something he needs her to sign, and so she goes around into the kitchen, and she says again that she's scared. She puts the hot water. She's got like a pot with some hot water in it, and so he takes the hot water as a threat. And then once she picks up the pot, but then her body language, where she drops down to get away, kind of, she sees him draw the gun, and she can see her recoil a little bit, that she wasn't aggressive at all. And when she didn't respond to his commands twice, then he began firing. And it's almost like he didn't understand. Sometimes it's like Greg Ellis put something together, I believe, the difference between police officers and peace officers, and the approach to policing. And I thought that this guy had, he equated her with that pot of water as a deadly threat, or he didn't, whatever. But he didn't use every option he could, which he should as a police officer, to de-escalate that. And the de-escalation that he could have done, a lot of guys don't think about, is, we can walk outside, you know what I'm saying? Gather our stuff together. And then if we feel like we want to take her to prison over it, take her to jail, then we'll form a plan, and then we'll go in there, without necessarily having to do, to shoot her. Now, if he had no way to go, maybe you could make the case that, the boiling hot water might have scalded him or something like that. But again, and people say, well, police officers don't have to retreat. Well, in the case where you have to lock her up, I get it, but he didn't have to arrest her. So she was the complainant. She called him over. She was clearly loopy. Okay, this is the crazy lady. All right, lady, have a nice night. We'll go out. Hey, we couldn't get her to sign on anything. Why? Because she's a little crazy. So we're going to leave here. That was a lot less trouble than what he's in now, and him perceiving, a lot of times I think some officers have a tendency to see that, they don't think outside the box sometimes. Kind of, probably seen the Kyle Dinkeller video, And one of the things we do in the class is, what are the other 8-9 things that he could have done, including getting his car and drive off and come back. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the cool thing about being a police officer, you're part of the biggest gang in the area. You can always go get friends, and we come back in an organized manner and then take this person down properly, you know what I'm saying, with as little loss of life as we can. So that's my opinion. I know people will have other ones, but I think he made terrible error in judgment, but you could, like everybody said, I think even you hinted to it, you could see his attitude the whole time.
That's right.
You know, you could see his attitude the whole time, and it was, and then, you start hearing his history, and he's got some problems as far as bouncing around from agency to agency, which is another thing. I know we're at a point where we're trying to get, finding good law enforcement. My son's complaining about what's going on in Murfreesboro, for example. He's a Murfreesboro cop, and some of these departments are having a hard time finding quality people, unfortunately.
Yes, everybody is, but I would rather have, a third of the police force, cut it in a third, cut it in a quarter, but they're the right people, you know what I mean? And
right.
Tony says Andrew broke it down. She launched a pot of boiling water at him.
She did.
I don't know about that. I'll need to watch that video.
Watch the video. She did.
What I saw is she dropped down and said, "I'm sorry," as soon as he pulled his gun. But I'll watch it again. I'll watch Andrew's take on it. But I'm just telling you, from having done the job, you're in this woman's house.
Yes.
And I was in a house one time taking a report. I've mentioned it on here at least once before. And I had a Marine Corps Reserve drill weekends. We had flown from Knoxville on a C-130, attacked combat town in Camp Lejeune, flown back, turned in our rifles. I washed the cami paint off my face, and then went to work as a police officer.
Wow.
And I was crazy tired.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm like this. I'm sitting there and I'm taking a report where I'm in the man's house, and he says, "Yeah, somebody busted my window out with a brick, and the brick's laying there, and his front window is just shattered."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and I said, "No, why would he do that? I don't understand." And he's kind of same like that woman. He's kind of not really with it. And he's like, I don't know. And I don't know. And I said, "Well, come on, man. Why do you know this guy?" It's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then why did he do it?" He goes, "I guess because I did this." And he reaches under a cushion on thing, and he pulls a gun and points it at me.
Whoa.
As I'm sitting there writing a report on his couch, talking to him.
Right.
Well, my partner draws his gun, and he's like, gun. And I'm like, I can't freaking believe this.
Yes.
Did I shoot and kill the guy? No. We got his guns out, there was a pause, and we let him start to comply. But you can speed these things up, or you can slow them down.
You really can.
And so if you watching the way he was talking to her and the callousness with which that's a headshot. That's a headshot. No, she's not gonna make it. And
yeah, he was very, very casual about using that. And I worked Buffalo during the early '90s crack era, and man, I guns came out a lot, and I could have shot a lot of people. And
amen.
But I decided, that I can't live that and have life over property, and life, preserving of life has been. Now, if I think you're going to do something to me, I actually did, discharge my weapon when I had to. But a lot of times I believe that the police officer's biggest tool is this thing right here.
Amen.
That and this together, you know what I'm saying? And if they're working together, you know what I'm saying, some of the people that I end up having trouble with later on end up being some people who help me out on crimes later on calls and things like that, because I didn't, mistreat them or didn't take an opportunity to do something that I absolutely positively didn't have to. And I just think that as a person who believes that life is sacred, that we should be very, very careful about what we do in those circumstances. And it should literally be, you have no other choice, even for us. And in that case, we all believe he had other choices. He just chose not to.
I had a real good friend when I was a cop. He went on he was a county officer. And I said, "I heard you was in a scrape over the weekend, man." He's like, yeah. I went on a call, 911 call. Husband and wife bickering. And the wife comes at me with a knife. And he said, "I just kind of came through the door, and I draw my gun, and she's coming down the hallway charging at me with a knife raised." And he says, "I jumped out the fucking window."
We've done that.
Behind me.
Take off running.
And he said, "I rolled off the porch," because I said, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, here's what's going through my mind, man. I'm on my probationary period. I'm going to shoot a woman inside her own house, jump out the window." Was his next response. And like you said, then he comes in with his friends. They take her into custody. Nobody has to die. But if you're not using this, I'm pointing to my head for those listening to the podcast, then you're going to make the wrong call. To that point, though, Tony says the A and O are usually always present. So he's talking about the ability and opportunity are always present. And in the case that I use for this to prove that I think Tony's absolutely spot on is you go into a bank and there's a bank guard. Does he have the ability to shoot you? Well, yeah, he's got a gun. Is the opportunity there? Yeah, I'm within 5 meters of the guy. Are you in any way in jeopardy? Absolutely not. So this is a thinking man's game. And if you can't use your brain to make these kind of life and death decisions with the tools that you have,
right,
then maybe you don't need to have those tools.
I agree 100%. And that's where better train. And you'll find that guys who are trained better, one of the reasons why we train is that buys us that time to make those solid decisions. I heard Brian Hill say it one time, and he said, good decision making is more important than good marksmanship. And I thought that was brilliant, what I'm saying? And I said, you're right, because there was times when, like I said, we could have shot people. And we were like, there was times we took off running, you know what I'm saying? Gathered ourselves, came back in an organized manner and took the person down, and, in a way that didn't require me to have to, sit up all night, doing, at that time it was P-73s, explaining why I shot somebody, you know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, now in those situations, there were times when I absolutely had to do that. But there were plenty of times where we did not have to do that. And if we didn't, we didn't, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, I think, like you said, the jeopardy and the judgment that comes along with that jeopardy is extremely important.
Yeah, and I don't think you or I have a problem getting violent. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Not at all.
Very comfortable with it.
Very comfortable.
However, shooting a woman, mentally deranged woman in her own house after she got, that's sad, man. That is sad. That should have never happened.
The part that got me was when she said, "I'm sorry." You know what I'm saying? Like you said, when she said, "I'm sorry," and if that's not a de-escalation clue, I don't know what is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, back away. And then reassess the situation and go, okay, no, this is not what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
And that's where training, you keep saying the training part, obviously judgment and training, I think they're hand in hand. But, once people are, the gun's out and the gun's on the trigger, the dog is ready to pounce. It's like, that's when you have to have get the gun down. Would she just say, listen,
right,
I'm sorry. Okay, ma'am. And let me help you slow it down. I had we did an entire show on it, but this was December 2019. I caught a guy out in my driveway trying to steal my catalytic converter. Could have shot the guy,
Right. Yes.
And I had a gun on him. He's got a screwdriver at one point. Won't go into the whole thing, but I didn't. Because he's all cracked out and drug addled. I'm like, hey, what's your name?
Yes.
Because he's freaking out.
Right.
And he's like, Chris, do me a favor. Step away from my truck, buddy. Okay. We do. And oh, yes, sir. Okay, good. Chris, why are you here?
And just go, Rich.
Let's bring the temperature down.
There you go. That makes me think of something we said earlier, and something that I heard Craig Douglas say that I thought was brilliant too. He said, we're in an age where people confuse information with experience.
Amen.
And, what you did there was show that experience. And that is so valuable. You know what I'm saying? Because again, you were able to slow things down. You know what I'm saying? And all right, let's figure out what's going on here before we both do something rash that's going to change our lives forever. And we can make this a speed bump instead of a hole, a huge hole that we both fall in. You know what I'm saying? And get by it. And so kudos to you on that. That's exactly what, and the better you train, and the more experience you have, but even if you don't have as much experience, the training will hopefully help you slow things down.
Amen. Yeah.
For example, if you have good marksmanship skills, for example, and you got a pretty crisp draw, that buys you a little more time to figure out what's going on here. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's exactly, to your point, Ak, that's exactly what Steve says here. It says confident in your skills helps you have better judgment. Well, that is true.
Yes, very true.
Ruben is on over there, Amador Training Group.
He says the purpose. Oh, I've got that quote on a slide in my PowerPoint. Thanks, Ruben. That's awesome. Yep. Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and read it for those that can't see. It says, the purpose to fight is to win. No possible victory in defense. The sword is more important than the shield, and skill is more important than either. The final weapon is the brain. Yeah.
And that's a Steinbeck quote. So
is that right? Okay.
Yeah, Steinbeck quote. So yeah.
Dig it.
A whole slide to that in my PowerPoint in our fighting pistol class, man.
Well, it reminds me of Miyamoto Musashi, probably Japan's greatest samurai. His book of Five Rings, he talks about, I train people to win with a long sword.
Yes.
And I train people to win with a short sword. My training is not about, I'm paraphrasing big time, but not about the tool. It's about winning.
Yes.
So that you can win with anything. Yeah. And that's exactly right.
And he did.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, sticks. Yes,
Yes, he did.
yes, he
That's some
did.
really good stories there. I think it would be somewhat malfeasance if we didn't talk about the assassination attempt on a former president and just kind of get your thoughts on where the nation's headed. Take it wherever you want. Is it being made much ado about nothing? Did we stand on the precipice of potentially some sort of conflict here in America? Where are we heading, brother?
I think we dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah, excuse the the term, but yeah, I'm so happy that he's okay, and that because I think that we do have. I think America has to be careful about being controlled by the fringes, and that most of us, the 80% here in the middle, that we all love our country, love our kids, you know what I'm saying, and love our families, and want good schools, decent job, and and just want to be left alone to live our lives. And I think that we got polarizing forces that are hard at work to kind of break up what we got going on. And if we're not careful and don't remember, that we have a lot more to be thankful for, that they'll drive us down a very dark road. I think that we're in for some pretty interesting times coming forward. We've got things working on us that we didn't have 50 years ago, like social media,
Yeah.
echo chambers, things like that. And it's got people doing, crazy stuff, and I do believe that there are people, I don't want to get conspiratorial, but I do believe that there are people who make money and thrive in chaos, and there are people who would love to bring chaos to America. And I think it's up to us to fall into that, and I hope that we don't, because we've got a beautiful thing going, and this country, we've had some strong issues, and we've worked a lot of that stuff out, and we're in a pretty good place. And if we're not careful, that it can be, like I said, pushed off the precipice. But I, like I said, I'm just glad I'm really glad that didn't happen for many reasons. Whether you support him or not, I think that that's still a bad thing to happen. So.
100%. I think you're right. I think we did dodge a bullet. But the other thing is, like, some people are like, "Whoo, sigh of relief." I'm like, it ain't over.
No, it's not. No,
it ain't
not.
over.
It's not. It's not. It's not
You
at
think
all.
that's round one?
Yes. And I fully expect, and that's what I said for this fall. I said I fully expect 2025 to have a lot of civil unrest. So people of our mindset, should be careful about where we go, what we do, make smart choices, make smart decisions, be aware of your surroundings, and stay as far away from that type of stuff as you can. But there are going to be, there's people who want to pull this thing apart, and they're going to be working hard, and they're well funded, you know what I'm saying, and we're working hard to do those things. So, we have to just, like I said, be very, very careful going forward.
Yes, I was just watching the news this morning before you and I jumped on the show together, and they were showing buses of these people that went through Washington, D.C., spray painting monuments and just burning flags and doing all the stuff they were doing. And it was bus after bus load of these people. I'm like, who's paying for these charter buses? I mean, they're not free. They cost a lot of money. And who's flying these people in and getting all this rally together, man? Those are the dark forces.
Yes. Yes.
That
very organized, very well funded, and they move all around the country. And then the media makes it seem like they're a lot bigger and a lot more successful than oftentimes they are. And I've seen parallel movements. My little bit of study of history has shown parallel movements, what I'm saying, in other countries, what I'm saying, we study the Russian Revolution, things like that, what I'm saying, these, what we're seeing. I've spoken to guys, I've watched videos of guys from the CIA and stuff like that talk about how some of the destabilization techniques that have been used in other countries, they're starting to see some of that stuff being used here, so we just have to be very careful and hold on, man. Remember who we are, and that we've got something good coming. Don't let them take it from us.
Yeah. And I think people need to hear what you said. 2025 and probably for the next several years are going to be, I mean, I don't give a shit what side of the aisle you are, where you're, it doesn't matter. Somebody's going to come in next year, get sworn in that you ain't going to like, or, has the potential to. So, and it could go really weird. And I heard Dave Rubin, do you know who Dave Rubin is? A political commentator.
No.
He's a gay man. Not that that matters, but just
Mm-hmm.
contextually, he used to be, really on the left, and then
Mm-hmm.
somewhere along the way, he got red pilled, and he's got a pretty interesting show as a
Check him
political
out.
commentator. Yeah, because he comes at this like I used to be one of those people, and now I kind of
Mm.
see where it's going. And
Right.
he moved to Florida from California, so
Okay. Yep.
him and his husband did so. And
Mm-hmm.
he says, I'm all about, if Florida wanted to secede, I would support that. I'm like, man, and he's a reasonable, rational person. He's like, because on some level, I can't be a part of where parts of the certain states are taking their country. When you and I were growing up, people weren't like, I'm leaving Minnesota for
Right.
Iowa because I just can't stand what's going on in Minnesota anymore.
Right.
That did not happen. This bifurcation of America, this
That's interesting. Yes.
balkanization is new.
So you said the B word, man.
Yeah.
And it can. The thing is people are moving around, so you got to wait till it settles. You know what I'm saying? People are moving around culturally. You know what I'm saying? So you got to wait till that happens, and then after that happens, it's going to be interesting to see what happens and where the fissures come. You know what I'm saying? Because I watched the guy and he was talking about how the United States, we're used to, when we think about civil war, our civil war was our country broke into two countries that fought a war and then came back together.
Mm-hmm.
He said, civil war everywhere else is balkanization. You know what I'm saying? Parts of the country break off and then, decide they don't want to be a part of this because culturally they feel like they don't align with people with the rest of the country anymore. And, I think that because we don't have a frame of reference for that type of thing, sometimes we're ripe for falling into it if we're not careful.
Yeah, I'm reading a book. I've got a lot of books going on right now, but one of them is, I think it's called Outbreak, and it was written in maybe the late 1860s. So, and it was written by Abraham Lincoln's personal secretary. And so he's very close to the thing. His language is really charged with, he's pissed off, his boss got shot in the head, and he's writing this, but and unlike some of the history that you and I were taught in school, as far as like, you had the raid on Harper's Ferry by John Brown, these abolitionists. You had Harriet Beecher Stowe writes Uncle Tom's Cabin. You had Frederick Douglass and his amazing book. You have all these things that's kind of leading up to it. For him, he says, okay, yeah, that's contextually appropriate. However, it really started when the governor of South Carolina wrote a letter, and he had it sent by private messenger to the 10 southern states and said, this is what I'm going to do if the Republicans put him at the Republican National Convention. If they make it Abraham Lincoln, I'm going to bounce. You do you. Right. I'm just telling you what we're going to do. And then he even talks about the letters that came back to him from the other states saying, that's cool, man. We're not going to do that. And most of them were like that. So I think one or two said, we'll have a convention and look at it, but it's probably not going to happen. And what's funny is once South Carolina did it and crossed that Rubicon, all the other states just kind of like dominoes started falling.
Wow.
I say that because these things can happen fast.
Yes. When they do, there's the build up, and then there's the the final straw, or what they call the tipping point. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then everything just cascades after that. So yeah, I think we're seeing. I agree. If that's what you're saying, is we're seeing that build up. Yeah, I hope that I'm gone.
I hope you're wrong too. But
no, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that I'm gone. I mean, I hope that this build up takes another 50 years or so. You know what I'm saying? And I'm because I don't want to see this thing come apart like that. Because you and I know when those things happen, a lot of people tend to die.
Yeah, man. We're talking about in our Civil War here in America. Scholars used to say 600,000. I think it's been upgraded to 750,000 if you count civilian killed and things of this nature. So this is horrific for our country. There's no good way. And to your point, you said you moved to Tennessee to find more like-minded people, right? I'm already here with my like-minded people like you. So, but people are shifting around the country, and they're going to vote that way. And I don't see anybody also building an exit ramp for this ideology. Right. There's nobody going like, hey, we don't have to go down this path. It seems like the rhetoric is going up and up and up. And I'll call Fox News out. One of their commentators yesterday said something that would have been unheard of a few years ago when he said that Kamala Harris was the original Haktua girl.
See, yeah,
Like, we don't need that in our political discourse.
See, you gotta, yeah, that doesn't help. You know what I'm saying? Not at all. And getting down with those people and acting like that, I think, is the worst thing that we can do. I think everybody needs to. What this country to me works better when we come together and there's conciliation, there's compromise, and we figure out, okay, you can't have everything. You can't have everything. What can we both live with? Let's find that in the middle. And unfortunately, it's like I said, there was a time when people in Congress would go back and forth and work with each other. You know what I'm saying? But now you're seeing such a polarization that it's I don't know. Like I said,
you're not going to get elected if you step across the aisle and try to work with somebody. They find out that you've had breakfast with Chuck Schumer. It's like your constituents going to vote your ass out. I've kept you on here long enough, my friend. I always enjoy talking with you, man.
Likewise, brother.
Where can folks find you? Where can they train with you? Tell us.
Citizensafety.com is the website. info@citizensafety.com is the email address to reach me and Tiff. Rich, get her on and talk to her. She's a wonderful lady. And one of the things that we do is we are trying to do something called Gateway Instruction, where we're trying to increase the 2A culture by bringing in all kinds of Americans, because the way this thing is going to stay strong is if we get all kinds of people in it, because we believe that the Second Amendment applies to everybody, even people who don't believe in the Second Amendment. So we're working hard at that. I also do some stuff with Rangemaster. We teach some classes, Gateway on up to, entry-level fighting pistol classes, and then we push them off to better people. That's our niche, but I also do some stuff with Rangemaster Tacticon, the Rangemaster Tactical Conference every year, and following my mentor Tom Givens around and helping them out whenever I can spread the gospel. So hopefully you guys come out and catch us in one of those classes. Great to see you.
Yeah, and I do, man. Within the next 12 months, I'm gonna figure out a class and come in and train with you, man. I'm looking forward to that.
I'll be happy to have you, man. Just give me a shout. We'll make it easy for you. All right?
Okay. Love it. And if you could get me, I definitely need a email introduction to Tiffany.
Definitely.
I took a webinar with one of John Hearn's webinar, and she was on there, but I've never got to train with her, and I've never got to interview her, and I would really look forward to that.
Yeah, she's a phenomenal woman, man. She's a former, she went into 20 years ago, around 24 years ago at this point. She, after living in Memphis, growing up in Memphis, experienced a lot of gun violence, loss of a person that she loved to it, decided to become a better gun control advocate by learning about it. So she went, fortunate for all of us, she walked into Rangemaster and took a class with Tom Givens and did a 180. And now we have somebody who is literally, me, John, Tom, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the stuff that we do without her. She's phenomenal.
100%. Ladies and gentlemen out there, make it a point to train with Aq. Check his website out and what him and Tiffany are up to, as well as Rangemaster. And Aq, if you would, give my brothers and sisters up there at the symposium this weekend a big hug from Rich Brown, will you?
I'll pass it on for you, brother.
All right. Guys, have Warrior Nation. Remember, the fight is coming. You ready?